Alright, this video is going to focus in on the very initial start of the cardiovascular system. So in taking a look at the cardiovascular system, the basic introduction to it is that it's going to contain not only the primary organ known as the heart, but it's also going to be containing the vessels. And the vessels are including the three of the arteries, which are the ones that are going to take blood away from the heart, the capillaries, in which you're going to see gas exchange, the gas being oxygen and carbon dioxide, and then the veins, in which the blood is going to be able to travel back towards the heart. Now, the purpose of the cardiovascular system, again, the heart and the vasculature, which meaning arteries, capillaries, and veins, is to provide not only oxygen but as well as nutrients. If you remember from our last unit, we just finished up with the digestive system that we broke down all the nutrients from the mechanical and chemical digestion from the mouth all the way into the stomach and absorbed those nutrients in the small intestine, and where it went was in the blood, where we can then pump it to different cells within the body and utilize it for later on. Now, as you scroll down a little bit further, we're taking a look at the structure of the heart. Now, maybe you remember from 7th grade that we talk about the heart, and even in 10th grade we talk about the structure of the heart being in 4 chambers. Now, the 4 chambers we're going to see here shortly is best known for just its efficiency, unlike that of a frog, where you're seeing a 3-chambered heart where it only has one ventricle on the bottom, where you're going to see some of the blood mixing. But if we look at the heart itself, it's a hollow cone-shaped structure that's approximately the size of your fist, around 14 centimeters by 9 centimeters wide. And it's going to line just posterior to that of the sternum, so right behind the sternum, and is found in the mediastinum, is the little cavity that's behind there, and again in the thoracic cavity. And it's going to be located right in the middle of the lungs. Here's a quick illustration of that, of what a human heart would look like. Now on this, again, you can kind of see the little Valentine's Day heart shaped around in there. But you are going to have vessels that actually feed the heart. Now, we have to remember that the heart is a nice pump, but the heart is made of muscle, and muscle is then made up of the different tissues, and the tissues are made up of cells. So each of these cells not only need to be able to pump really strong, but they need the oxygen as well as the nutrients that are being absorbed like every other cell. So we actually have smaller arteries as well as some veins that are going to travel back into the heart, but these ones right here are called the coronary arteries, and their job is to feed the heart actually with the oxygenated blood. Now, the thing you have to worry about with these guys, being that they are so small, if we start to see a lot of plaque or cholesterol being built up within it, these are the ones that can clot. And when we see these clot, that causes a myocardial infarction, or what we have all known as a heart attack. Now, if we take a look above, here's an illustration where the pulmonary trunk is going to branch out, and it's going to go over to the right side. So this is the right lung and the left lung. Now, you may be thinking this is the left side of the screen, this is the right side of the screen, but again, we have to reverse it onto you. So this is actually the right side of the heart, this is the left side of the heart. Okay. Working down and take a look at the heart itself, it's going to have different coverings that surround it. The outer covering that actually is located within kind of a sac is known as the pericardium. We could actually call this the parietal pericardium because it encloses the entire cavity, which is again in that mediastinum. Now, just inferior to that is going to be another type of pericardium. We call it the visceral pericardium, which is the same thing as the epicardium. We have that as a synonymous pair. Now, they are separated out, meaning the visceral pericardium and the parietal pericardium are separated out by a cavity that is going to contain fluid, and we're going to call this the pericardial cavity. And so the fluid or serous fluid is going to be located in there, helps support and cushion the heart. So if I take a look at an illustration within here, we have the superior and inferior vena cava would empty into this side, but we can see this sac-like layer that's being peeled back. That's the parietal pericardium, or just the pericardial sac. Now, in between there, you're going to have the fluid, which is in the cavity, and actually on the surface of the heart is going to be the visceral pericardium, which again, which we stated above, is also the epicardium. So if we were to go through the walls of the heart, it's going to go actually on the heart, not including the sac, so it would be pericardial sac, pericardial cavity, and now we actually get to the heart itself. So the outermost is the epicardium, which again is synonymous with visceral pericardium. Then we work our way down into the muscle layer, which is the myocardium, and then the innermost layer is the endocardium. So you're going to see kind of a shiny little layer. The only thing you really need to pick up on this is that we'll get to a little bit later on is look at the muscle thicknesses on the left versus the right side of the heart. Okay. Here's a diagram that you're going to be taking a look at later on in one of your assessments, but if we're able to map that out just based on the external or superficial and work our way deep within the heart, we have this pericardial sac, which is again the parietal pericardium, and then in between there you have the pericardial cavity that's going to contain fluid. On the actual heart itself, you have where the arteries and veins are going to be located on is the visceral pericardium, or we are known again as epicardium. The thick muscle layer is the myocardium, and then the inner shiny layer is the endocardium. Now, if we take a look at the heart chambers itself, we stated already before that there contain 4 different chambers. The 2 on top are the atriums, the 2 on the bottom are the ventricles. The jobs of the atriums are to receive blood. Now, on the right side of the heart, we're going to be receiving deoxygenated blood. On the left side of the heart, we're going to be receiving oxygenated blood. Now, it's going to be receiving it from some sort of a vein. Now, in particular, on the right side of the heart, it's going to be receiving it from the superior and inferior vena cava as well as the cardiac vein. And on the left side, it's going to be receiving it from the pulmonary veins. And we'll see an illustration here in a second. Now, the bottom ones are the ventricles. These are the thick muscles, so the myocardium is going to be much thicker. Their job is to pump blood out of the heart, so they're going to have to be much stronger. And on the right-hand side, it's going to contain deoxygenated blood, so its job is to pump it to the lungs so it could pick up the oxygen. And on the left-hand side, now it's oxygenated blood, and it's going to be able to pump it throughout the aorta to the either top portion of the body or the lower half of the body, so the head or down to the legs. So if we look at a cross-section now, a coronal cross-section, meaning a front and back cross-section of the heart, we can take a look at our 4 chambers. We have our 2 on top, 1 atrium and another, and then the 2 on the bottom, 1 ventricle and another ventricle. So now this is going to be one of your diagrams where we'll also be labeling. But if this side is going to contain, we said the right side of the heart is going to contain deoxygenated blood, left side contains oxygenated blood. So in the upper right-hand chamber, it's going to receive blood from the body. So we have the superior vena cava, so blood emptying from the head, and so maybe like the jugular vein, or blood coming down from the lower half of the body and emptying into the right atrium. From there, it's going to travel down through an AV valve, and an AV, all that refers to is atrial ventricular, atrium ventricles. And this is one that's got 3 little flaps, so we call it the tricuspid. So blood transfers down through this little 3-flap tricuspid valve and enters into the right ventricle. Now from there, the thick-walled, so a fairly thick-walled muscle of myocardium is going to pump the blood out this pulmonary valve and through this blue structure. Again, we're labeling it blue because it's deoxygenated. Our blood is never blue, but it's going to be traveling out through this area and it's going to hit the pulmonary trunk where it makes a nice big T. And this T can either travel to the left lung, so through the left pulmonary artery, or to the right lung, or the right pulmonary artery. And again, artery is again going away, and it travels into the lungs. Now in the lungs, we'll learn in our next systems where it's going to pick up the oxygen and drop off the carbon dioxide so we can then exhale it. That oxygenated blood has been picked up by the hemoglobin, and from there is going to send its way back via the bloodstream through the veins, and it's going to empty back into now the left atrium. Notice now these guys are illustrated in the coloration of red. So shown over here is red, and the aorta is red because it contains oxygenated blood. Now there is one instance in which we want to make sure all arteries except for the pulmonary arteries carry oxygenated blood. All veins except for the pulmonary veins carry deoxygenated blood. So this is where we're getting our one exception because it hasn't picked up oxygen and it's coming back from the lungs after it's picked up oxygen. Now, once the blood is in this left atrium, it's going to travel down through the 2 valves, so our bicuspid valve, AV valve, which is also known as the mitral valve, and enters down into the left ventricle. Now notice the thickness of this wall here. Much, much thicker, and that thickness allows us to be able to pump blood throughout the whole body. So when I squeeze this, it pumps it all the way to the tops of the head, all the way down to the bottom where our toes are at, because this one has to pump it throughout. This guy, this chamber on the right side, only has to pump it to the lungs, which again are just lateral to that of the heart. So if we're going to put that into terms, what we've seen below, we have a septum. The septum is this illustration right here. That's going to separate out the right and the left side. So we have, or excuse me, our right side and our left side, oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. And we should separate out into the AV valve. So on the right side we have a tricuspid, on the left side we have a bicuspid. And we have these little strings called chordae tendineae. Now the chordae tendineae are little strings that are attached onto these cuspid valves, and they originate by these papillary muscles. So I'm going to scroll back up here in just a second, and you'll take a look at the papillary muscles and the chordae tendineae. So as I scroll up, you can take a look at these strings. These are the chordae tendineae strings, and the papillary muscles are housing it here. So as the blood empties down through this tricuspid valve, the blood can push its way down through it, but when the ventricle squeezes, I don't want blood to go back up into the atrium. If it does that, it's what we get, it's called a heart murmur. We don't want that to happen. So these heartstrings, as well as these papillary muscles, hold this in place so the blood can't go back up this way. It's kind of that one-way street. It has to be forced out the pulmonary valve. And the same thing's happening over here. It can't go back up to the left atrium. It's got to go with the aortic valve. Okay? Here's just a kind of an oblique cross-section. See the two cusps and then the three cusps. If we take a look at it a little bit more, again, it's going to help prevent backflow. We don't want backflow in the heart. That is going to produce what is called a heart murmur. If we work down a little bit further, we just talk about movement of blood flow through the superior and inferior vena cava, bringing the deoxygenated blood into the right atrium, and then from there travels through the tricuspid valve down to the right ventricle, which then pumps blood to the lungs, where it can pick up the oxygen. And then from there, it's going to travel its way from the lungs back to the left atrium, where it's going to receive the oxygenated blood, and it's going to be coming from the 5 pulmonary veins. 5 because the right lung contains 3 lobes of the lung, and the left lung contains 2. The left ventricle, then after it receives blood through the mitral valve, it's going to pump blood throughout the aorta and eventually get it to the rest of the body. Now quickly as we wrap up, one of the last things we want to talk about is the electrical impulses we've seen in the nervous system. We have from our brain sending that electrical signal from our hypothalamus, again the teller, to the doer, the medulla oblongata, which sends electrical impulses to these different nodes. There's one's called an SA node and an AV node. And I'll take a little bit of structure here. So it's sending the electrical signals to these SA nodes, where if you look at these yellow nerve impulses, kind of squeezes all the way around in the top. And as the top squeezes, it forces the blood down either through the tricuspid or the bicuspid. And as that squeezes, just after that one squeezes, we get initiation complex to start the squeezing of the bottom part of the muscle, which then forces from the right ventricle and the left ventricle out either the pulmonary valve or the aortic valve throughout to the lungs or to the rest of the body. Alright, in our next section we're going to take a look at mapping the blood flow through and as a quick review. Hope this helped.